June 28, 2011, North Kingstown School Committee meeting to order. If everyone would please rise and say the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lorraine, if you could go ahead and call the roll.
Linda Avanzato.
Here.
Belvoid Benson. Larry Cerisi.
Here.
William Mudge.
Here.
Kimberly Page.
Here.
Joe Thompson.
Here.
Richard Welsh. Julia Hell. Thank you.
All right. I will say that Mr. Welch asked me to say tonight he is the clerk. He's clerk for the House Committee, or anyway, he's clerk for the House for one of the committees. Anyway, tonight they have 48 bills on their agenda, and so they were supposedly starting at 4. He did not think he would be back for the meeting, so he regretted that. But I imagine they will be going late, so that's why he is not here tonight. All right, Lorraine, if you could go ahead and do the calendar.
No events scheduled for July, no school committee meetings. So for August 8th, Policy Subcommittee meeting, 10 a.m., Central Ad Building. August 9th, School Committee Work Session, 7 p.m., North Kingstown High School. August 22nd, Budget Subcommittee meeting, 1 p.m., Central Ad Building. August 23rd, School Committee Business meeting, 7 p.m., North Kingstown High School. August 30th, first day of school. Thank you.
All right. We have a presentation next by Trish Cawley, so go ahead.
Recently, we started talking about lunch prices. And what I originally thought I should ask for as a recommendation, I put out there basically for the people in the school to know about, for all of you on the school committee, and I got a wave of comment that it was not aggressive enough. And I think part of that has to do with the connotation that school lunch has. Now, currently, we use $2 for our elementary school. Anyone who's a parent here, can you imagine your kids going out? Mom, I'm going to Jitters. I'm going anywhere. Here, and I hand them $2. Resoundingly, everyone, when I have proposed that scenario, has said, what am I going to do with this? And I started thinking about it, and I decided I would go around and see what you can get for $2 in North Kingstown. And I call it our price against theirs. So I went to D'Angelo's, and I ordered my kids' meal. And I got my kids' meal. I placed everything on a tray so we could have some kind of a comparison. And the kids' meal cost me $4.84. Now, prior to this, when I was going up and down Post Road, I just had items in bags. But I had my receipt, and it's like when you buy an isolated item. If you grab something at the register and throw it in there, you don't necessarily pay attention to what it costs. But if you just go there and buy a single item, $4.84. Wow. And this is the $2 lunch that was being served that day. I actually called the kitchen and said, take a picture of a lunch, please. So then I thought about, okay, so it was $4.84. What am I going to get for $2 if I went to D'Angelo's? And that's what the $2 would buy me. Went on to Wendy's. Dr. Thornton saw this picture, and he picked up the phone and said, "Trish, did you manhandle this sandwich?" And I said, "No, I did not. In fact, I unwrapped it like it was a Tiffany's bag." $3.66.
Stomp on it.
Our $2 lunch. What would I get from Wendy's for $2 with a kid's meal? A cup of chili. Or I may get a cheeseburger and an apple slice and 4 ounces of milk. Once again, this is what we're serving day in and day out for $2. Same scenario with Domino's. Pizza and cheesy breadsticks are popular items. We are underpriced. We are grossly underpriced. And based on the information from those establishments that I went to, we're underpriced 100%. If I took the average of those kids' meals and we had charged accordingly at the school lunch program, we would have increased revenue by $225,000. These are our current lunch prices. I feel like there should be equity. I know there should be equity in lunch prices for the upcoming school year. With the elementary school, $250, the middle school, $325, and the high school, $350. The revenue increase for that, based on a 6% decrease in participation, would be $93,000. So with all this RFP chat, I was like, well, I've been on RFPs. I've done RFPs. I think I'll do a PFS. I named it myself. Proposal for Sustainability. So I set up what I would have for an RFP on myself, and there were 3 significant findings from the PFS. One thing was that our food cost is actually very competitive with the contract management companies. We're spending approximately $2 more per student per year. Prices have to go up. The other thing is the federal reimbursement rate does not reflect the current cost of our operation. So when we have a free student or a reduced student, what we're getting from the federal government, that isn't covering our costs as well. And the third significant finding was regarding labor cost containment. That's where, when you look at the whole scenario, we fall drastically short for financial responsibility. But there is some good news. MK has a best practice going on right now since 2002 to 2003, and it involves the COSI staff. And 50% of the corporations in the country actually use this best practice as well. And it is a paid time off plan. And I feel like this induces our organization to face the reality for sustainability that we have to do something that is going to create just as much of savings as we increased in the revenue in the previous part of this presentation. Thank you. Question?
Mr. Cerisi, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mrs. Page. More of a comment than a question. Probably in my 5 years on this committee, one thing that I did that I probably enjoyed more than anything else in the 5 years was the day I came out with Mrs. Brunel to Davisville Middle School to serve lunch to the students, volunteer. I thought I was a big help. I don't think the rest of the staff thought I was a big help. I was more of a hindrance than a help. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it gave me an opportunity to see the quality of the food that is served to the students and to see the quality of the work that the food service workers do and the preparation and the cleanliness and the nutrition and the way that they interact with the students on a daily basis. Because of that, I've been supportive of the program. I will continue to be supportive of the program. The challenge has always been making it financially sustainable. And Trish, you and the rest of the food service workers have always gone above and beyond to try to accomplish that, and it's very difficult, especially with the ending of federal and state surplus items that used to come to the district, in addition to the continuing rise of food cost of food itself, and we all know that when we go to the market every week and buy our groceries, $100 doesn't put as much in the cart as it used to a couple of years ago. So very challenging. But you really can't, you got to compare apples to apples, and you really can't put a price on that type of nutrition and interaction with the kids on a daily basis and just the work that goes into it. So going back several meetings ago, I'd asked Dr. Thornton if we could have some comparison done to what our lunch prices are and compared to surrounding school districts, and we did get that comparison, and we are lower than some of the surrounding school districts. And obviously we don't want to price ourselves out of business, but at the same time we still have to keep food prices where we can remain compatible with surrounding districts. So I think that's obviously something that the superintendent and his staff can work on as far as setting the food prices for next year. And, again, we need to be fair to, obviously, the parents and the students, but also charge a price that's comparable with surrounding school districts. And I think if we do get the prices where we're competing with surrounding school districts, we can get towards that goal of being sustainable and keeping the current program in place that we do have in place. So thank you very much for your time.
I remember that day, too. I gave you a name tag on your apron.
I did.
It said Mr. Cerisi, but I changed it to I'm in training halfway through the first lunch.
And the choice was turkey and pizza, and much to my surprise, the students had a choice, and I would say 80% of them chose turkey, which really surprised me. So, but
There's hope.
Does anybody else have any comments?
Good job.
I say thank you, Trish. As always, you come to the table and bring some new ideas to us, how we can, keep this program going and keep it in-house if we can. So thank you very much.
I learned myself, which is always good.
thank you.
Yeah, I would say thank you, Trish. I appreciate the presentation, and it was very informative, but especially when you had given us a couple weeks ago, the sampling of just what we compared to others. I don't think I need to reiterate, Mr. Cerisi. So I think how this works is that on our August meeting that we'll put this on, I'm pretty sure we need to vote on the price increase. Am I correct? Have we done that in the past, or is it just something that gets done?
I believe it gets done, but if memory serves, was a couple of years ago, I think when I first was here, I think we had a consensus or a conversation, but I think we more informed the committee. I don't recall the vote, but we certainly had that conversation.
Oh, but then I wouldn't have been on the committee at that time.
Don't know.
All right, so if we don't need to have a vote, then I guess it'll just be something that happens without us, and we.
If you'd like, we can certainly put it on the agenda just to tell you where we think it's going to go, to kind of have that conversation with you in August.
I guess I would ask do committee members feel as if this needs to be on the agenda, or are you fine with if this is just something that happens?
Let it happen.
I'm fine if we could just get correspondence from the superintendent and letting us know, keeping us
Okay.
updated. So,
All right, thank you very much. Good luck.
thank you.
All right, so now we move on to the election of the school committee chair and then vice chair. Mr. Cerisi?
Thank you, Mrs. Page. At this time, I'd like to nominate Mrs. Page for chair and Mr. Welch for vice chair of the school committee.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair, could we break that down to chair and vice chair separately? Or do we have to?
Amendment.
We can. If you'd like to make if you'd like to amend the motion, you may do that.
Yes, I'd like to amend the motion to separately vote on those, please.
I'll second that.
Okay? So there is a motion on the floor to separate the votes, and there has been a second. Is there any discussion on that motion? All right. Seeing no comments, let's go ahead and take a vote.
You want a roll call?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Splitting the motion.
Linda Avanzado.
On splitting the motion, no.
Larry Cerisi.
No.
William Mudge.
Yes.
Kimberly Page.
Yes.
Joe Thompson.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-2.
All right, so let's take the first part of the motion is for chair. Is there any discussion on that motion?
I'll second.
No, it's already been motioned and seconded, so it's just a matter if there's any discussion on the nomination for myself as chair.
Yes, so it's two separate action items now.
Right, and that's what I'm talking about. Is there any sort of discussion on that? If not,
Call for vote?
okay, go ahead and have the vote.
Larry Cerisi.
Yes.
William Mudge.
Yes.
Kimberly Page.
Yes.
Joe Thompson.
Yes.
Linda Avanzado.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, so now we take.
Chair, may I make a
Yes.
motion that Mr. Thompson be nominated for?
You got to vote on the second one.
We have to vote on the motion that's on the floor first, and then if that does not pass, then you could make your motion. But we have to take the motion that's on the floor first. So the motion on the floor is for Dick Welch for vice chair. Is there any discussion?
Just vote.
Okay, I do know that Mr. Welch said he would accept the position because I talked to him about that yesterday. So let's go ahead and have a roll call vote.
Larry Cerisi.
Yes.
William Mudge.
No.
Kimberly Page.
Yes.
Joe Thompson.
No.
Linda Avanzado.
Yes.
Okay, the motion
Motion passes
passes.
3-2.
Yes, thank you. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
We now move on to correspondence. Does anybody on the committee have correspondence? Yes, Mr. Cerisi.
Mrs. Page, I would just ask that before we get into correspondence, I'd like to avoid what transpired at our last meeting during correspondence, and I would ask that either yourself as chair or legal counsel can outline and define for the committee exactly what correspondence is. It's always been my understanding and my interpretation that it's for committee members to submit correspondence from constituents in the community or staff regarding school committee or school department matters. At our last meeting, we spent 45 minutes on correspondence, if you remember correctly, and much of it was question and answers, personal comments from committee members, opinions from committee members on various items. It's turned more into a debate rather than a simple formality of just submitting correspondence, and it really should take us 2 minutes to move through correspondence. I mean, we have long agendas and we have important school department business, and I'd like to finish the agendas and get to the school department business rather than spend 45 minutes on correspondence. If everyone understands that and can agree with that, fine, we can move on. If there needs to be some type of outline or definition of what correspondence is, I would ask that you, as chair of this meeting, or legal counsel, outlines that for the committee, so we can move through these agendas more freely.
All right, I'll take that under advisement, Mr. Cerisi, since I am frequently the person who sometimes has
No,
long
no.
correspondence. I'll make sure that I
correspondence is-
tell her myself, too.
No, your correspondence is always school department related, and I have no objection to that at all.
I didn't take any offense. Okay. So is there correspondence from committee members? I have 3 things, but did somebody else have correspondence?
Could I make a comment, please? On
Yes,
correspondence?
if you have correspondence, yes.
Yes. About a month ago, I submitted some correspondence here requesting that this committee consider several action items to be put on the agenda, including the discussion regarding the school committee lawyer. There was 3 or 4 of them, anyway. Without getting into the details, that was officially submitted, and it was submitted in accordance with our policy for putting items on the agenda. I was never responded to by anyone, and those items were not reflected on a subsequent school committee agenda since I submitted them. And I would like to understand when, even though this is under correspondence, which I think is certainly legitimate, why those items were not placed on the school committee agenda. Did the superintendent of schools, did the chairman or vice chairman discuss these items?
Point of order,
And did they
Madam Chair.
review those items?
He's okay.
And why weren't these actions, to put these items on the agenda, and I don't have them specifically in front of me, why weren't they considered and why weren't they put on the agenda?
Madam Chair, there's a point of order.
Okay.
It's been made.
All right, so.
Excuse me.
Hold on.
Excuse me. Every time we hear point of order,
All right,
it's to
one
interrupt
person at a
someone.
time. I'm going to take the point of order, and then we'll go back to the correspondence. Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My point of order is not to interrupt anyone. My point of order is for procedural purposes in accordance with Robert's rules. Again, this type of discussion that's taking place on the correspondence is not what the agenda item of correspondence is for. As I said before we even got into correspondence, I would ask that if we're going to follow Robert's rules, we please use correspondence for what it's intended for. Please, I'm asking respectfully.
I will just address Mr. Mudge's issue is that anytime anything is put on the agenda or is asked to be put on the agenda, it can be placed anywhere on the agenda. And the items that you asked for were placed under correspondence. And so I think that's apropos to address it at this time, since it was correspondence and that was where we put it. I'd be more than happy to discuss later on as to why they weren't put on the rest of the agenda. It's the superintendent and the chair's prerogative to put things on wherever they want on the agenda, and at that time, they were put onto a correspondence. So,
Yeah, but
any other
They
correspondence?
were put on, Madam Chairman, for discussion, so they never appeared under discussion. And that's troubling to me because we have a policy to follow that we can submit within 2 weeks, so forth, before the prior meeting, and have items put on the agenda. And they were never addressed at all whatsoever.
Right, they were put under correspondence.
Why?
It doesn't say in the policy as to where they have to go, so they can be put wherever, and yours were put under correspondence.
So
Okay,
therefore, we couldn't talk about them then.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Any other
Oh,
correspondence?
I'm not, but I specifically, if you go back to the meeting, Madam Chairman, I submitted them as correspondence to the school committee for action to put them on the agenda for discussion. Now.
And that was not chosen as to how they were going to be dealt with. They were put under correspondence.
But why? Why weren't, well, the request was like any meeting. I wanted to put this on for the discussion item.
Right, and that was chosen not to do that.
Who
So
chose not to do that?
As I said, that was a discussion that was with the superintendent and the chair at the time we had to decide.
Well,
So
were you part of that
I'm going to say that your
discussion?
question, yes, I was.
So the points that I put in here for discussion, to put on the agenda, so we have a public discussion, you thought, you unilaterally decided not to put these on for discussion.
I've answered your question now. We're going to move on. I have a superintendent. Yes.
Just to clarify, in terms of policy BE, as we've been interpreting it, we do review all requests, and in this case, we felt correspondence was the best location. If at that point, several members wanted to then put it on the next agenda, that was our thinking in terms of moving it off correspondence. Those items, in our view, were already asked and answered.
Well-
Therefore, they went in correspondence.
Well, listen, I sent my request. It said, my request is sent to the school committee to put these on the agenda. It wasn't sent to the superintendent of schools. I sent it to the school committee, this board, so the school committee could vote whether they want to put it on or not. It was the school committee's decision to vote whether they wanted these on the agenda or not, and that never happened. Superintendent doesn't have anything to do with this. It's a school committee matter.
Okay, Mrs. Avanzato.
Just a quick comment on that. I don't think the committee votes on whether to put each item on the agenda, and I do believe we had the legal counsel issue and the other issues on several times, and to keep voting and revoting because someone doesn't like the results of the vote, that's within the purview of the superintendent and the chair to say that's enough, the committee's already addressed the issue. Moving on to correspondence, I just wanted to mention I had received correspondence from a parent on a couple of special education matters that they asked us to address, one being the Transportation Special Education Subcommittee. That committee hasn't been meeting. It was meeting like several years ago, and now they just have not been meeting, and they're wondering whether we're going to start those meetings again. I believe a new charge was drafted for that committee back in '09. I have all the information. I'm going to forward it to the other members because there are several issues that they could bring the committee back again and address.
What was it
those
called?
issues.
I missed it.
Special Education Transportation Subcommittee.
Transportation.
And I'm not sure if any of us are currently on that committee or what the status is of that right now. Mrs. Benson is on it, so I just wanted to
All right.
bring that up.
Well, once you forward that on, we can deal with that. Any other correspondence?
I've got a very nice note from Kathy Miller, and I think this might have been copied into the minutes. I have a very interesting and enjoyable Fishing Cove Elementary School 5th grade promotion ceremony, and there's a letter from the YMCA kind of reviewing all the different things that are available to the YMCA, to the school committee and various schools at the Y, and I think it'd be of much interest to the people, and I believe that's in the packet also. And then finally, I received an invitation to a number of musical entertainments on Tuesday nights down at the Harborside. So that may not be strictly school business.
No, but it's something that's going on tonight. Maybe that's where people
yeah.
who are, rather than our meeting.
Exactly.
I received correspondence from Louise Danette talking about how she was so proud of the parent support, teacher dedication, outstanding work of her support staff, that all their kindergarten students reached at or above grade level in reading. So it was quite a feat. They were very successful this year, and so she wanted to pass that on. I also received correspondence from Terry Merkel congratulating Nancy LaPasta Frazier. She spent 5 days at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. I believe her picture is in the paper. And the last piece of correspondence that actually I don't have in paper form, I received, I was at the Davisville Middle School High School concert last month, and I wish to report that one of their students composed a piece, a student, 8th grade student, composed a piece that was played by the 8th grade band. Chris Lysick composed a piece for every member of the orchestra, and Mr. T said that had been, other students had attempted it or talked about it. No student had ever followed through in the past. And so the fact that at the concert the students performed it for the first time in public, it was a very good piece. It was very impressive to have an 8th grader compose that. All right. If there's no other correspondence, we'll move on to superintendent's report.
Citizens' comments.
Oh, I'm sorry, citizens' comments. That was not meant to be overlooked, sorry. All right, I don't see anybody's name signed up, but if you want to speak tonight, please just come up to the mic one at a time and give your name and your address and speak. Tonight is a business session, so all the citizens' comment is in the beginning, just as a reminder.
Let me bring this.
Dave Adhesion from North Kingston High School, teach on the lovely third floor here. What you're getting right now is a handout of windows that I counted here in this building. Dr. Thornton came a few weeks ago in school and spent the whole day following around us. One of my students, Spencer Thorpe, who happened to write to him, unbeknownst to me, regarding the heat wave on the third floor. So what I did was I went around and I counted the windows on the third floor, the ones that I could reach. And you'll notice that only 5% of the windows on the third floor open in the hallway. You even have one classroom, which you see there, classroom 300A, which is a reading room, which doesn't have any windows that open. And as you know, there's no air conditioning up on the third floor. I really asked that the school committee really consider over the summer this year. I'm not asking for AC, I'm not asking for a big exhaust fan. Open some of the windows on the third floor. If you notice the ones next to 314, which is the teacher's room, there are 36 windows there that magnify the sun all day long. Not one of them open. You have a stairwell right next to you, right over here, next to the main office. With over 70 windows, not one of them open. And if you look further at these windows, I can tell you right now there are only 3 in the classroom hallways that open. That's next to 313, next to 325, and next to 330. All those other windows that open happen to be right above you over here at top of the open spine area. And so you know when you open those windows, any cold air that might come in drops right down to the first floor. We could really use some windows that open and to create some type of movement of air on the third floor. And if there's any way you could spend a few dollars to create some movement up there, it'd be greatly appreciated. This is also tied into, by the way, to the calendar committee. That's another reason why I'm here. I'm assuming that's going to be discussed today because in the last school committee meeting, it was said it was put on the next agenda for more discussion. So I don't know if it's at the end where you talk about subcommittee reports or not. But we're starting school in August in this building. I can promise you it's going to be hot. When Dr. Thornton was in my room that morning, he showed up at 7:30 in the morning. It was already 83, 84 degrees in my classroom at 7:30 in the morning. I can promise you by the end of the day, it was upper 80s, lower 90s. Teaching and learning is dramatically impacted negatively by the temperature in this building. And I really hope that you guys would be able to open up some windows in this building. That's all I'm asking for. Thank you.
Excuse me, do you mind repeating your name for the record?
David Avedisian.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Avedis, I know this is just your comment time, but I do have a question. Do these windows not open, or are they not able to be opened?
They're not. You can't open them at all. They just don't have any. They're just fixed windows. I guess when they built this place, it was built for AC, but no one ever told anyone that they cut AC out of the budget. So you have massive greenhouse effect on the third floor. I can promise you these same exact windows exist on the second floor and don't open too. So you could probably take these numbers and just submit it for the second floor. I'm just going by heat rises. It wasn't until a few years ago that they actually put the 3 windows that open in the classroom hallways. Probably about 4 years ago. I happened to be at Charahoe at that time, and I came back, and the windows, they opened up 3 windows on the third floor and 3 on the second floor. They do help. We need more.
Mr. Mudge.
You're absolutely correct. It's been a design problem for 10 years, and no one has done a thing about it. What's even worse about that is, as far as I'm concerned, is the ventilation and the air exchange in all the classrooms. Not just the heat, but the air exchange. And are we living up and following our OSHA standards? They've changed over a period of time. And I fully support, an initiative to go in and actually monitor the air quality in each of these rooms because of this as well. And especially, you have the similar problems in the winter, you understand, okay? Yeah. So it's a terrible situation, and we should take some action to look into this. Now, I don't know how many we can open, but we certainly need to ventilate this this building.
Coming
And-
back in August.
Well, I'm not sure what's going to happen from here in August. My point is, they're going on for 10 years, unfortunately, and the school committee never addressed this before, and I'm supporting you. We ought to address it and get some A&E people in here to do that, and do it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Avedisian.
Jim McGuinn, 412 Chimney Rock. I think the presentation by the Director of Food Services was excellent. And what was the last year that the prices for lunches were increased? 2004?
That's what Mrs. Colley said.
Okay. Probably would be a good recommendation to review that on a yearly basis as part of the budget subcommittee process. Compare the rates for other schools in the area, South County, let's say, and see where we are, and report to the school committee on a yearly basis of where the school stands, because certainly food prices have changed since 2004. And we've been running a deficit and had to fund that deficit out of the general fund for a number of years, and essentially write the money off. Interesting, Mr. Avedisian came up before me. One of the comments I was going to make was that 3 years ago, Mr. Avedisian does an excellent job, as do a lot of teachers in the school, and he goes above and beyond what is expected of a teacher. And he takes a class and he looks at social issues and issues that impact the school every year. And 3 years ago, he looked at this issue, and and they even looked at, if you remember, the disposable trays for the lunch program. But one of their recommendations was increasing the lunch fees to pretty much what Trish had recommended. That was 3 years ago. Mr. Avedisian's class, I don't know how many years ago, they all run together sometimes, looked at the electrical use in the building. And one of the things that they found was that this building runs about $320,000 a year in electricity use. We're one of the highest per square foot electricity use districts in the state. Another cost-cutting thing that was done when the building was built was you have to have exit signs on 24 hours a day. Well, the hall lighting was connected to the exit signs. There's new technology in exit signs, very low watt LEDs that could be retrofitted so you wouldn't have to have the hall lights on. They're battery backup, like 20 hours. I mean, there's new technologies to retrofit. You could take it out of the Capital Reserve Fund or someplace and save significant money, because even on the sunniest day, that the area out here, all the hall lights are on. It was made to be sunlit during the day. You have to have all the hall lights on. So there's ways to save money, and the kids have come up with some great ideas, under Mr. Avedisian's direction over the years. Something to correspondence. Having been, someone who has studied and followed Robert's Rules of Order for 30 years now, correspondence can be from the public. It can also be from a committee. And correspondence, and when you put that in connection with your policies that say, if someone wants something put on the agenda, and the assumption in there is that it will be for discussion and vote, not to be put on for correspondence. That's about the biggest cop-out I've ever heard, quite frankly. If someone wants something put on the agenda for discussion and potential action, it gives specific 14 days or whatever for school committee members and the public. I will remind the members of this committee that there's one thing that is dictated in the U.S. Constitution twice. And that's due process at all levels of government. And that's the only way people can walk out of a courtroom and be satisfied with the decision if they won or they lost. It's the only reason people can go to a town meeting or an election if they won or they lost. It's sort of like a football game. If you know what the rules are and the officials are officiating it according to the rules, you can accept if you lose or you win. The problem that makes this committee dysfunctional is you do not follow due process. You are, and I've asked people around the state, is the North Kingston School Committee the norm, or is it out of the norm? And people around the state have said, no, North Kingston School Committee is more dysfunctional than any other in the state. And I think the biggest reason is you don't follow your own procedures, your own processes, your own rules, and you don't follow due process. And I think this is a good opportunity for a turning point and to get some credibility, because you are now, with the pension issues that you have to deal with in the budget next year and other issues at the federal level, Greece is looking as default and the contagion that could have. U.S. government debt ceiling. You've got serious issues facing you financially. You need credibility. You need a bond. To do that, you need due process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graham.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Stephen Skaggs. I live at 41 Verdant Circle. I just want to say a little about my background. I'm a former Master Sergeant in the United States Army Reserves, an Iraqi veteran, a Bosnian veteran, and I'm military retired. And I'm also a teacher here in North Kingstown for the last 11 years. And I'm here tonight kind of on what he was touching on, because I just got wind that Dr. Thornton might be leaving. And I was flabbergasted when I heard that. I was upset. I was taken back. I couldn't believe that the best thing that we've had happen to North Kingstown school system might be leaving. And that's why I'm here today. I might be one of the only ones talking about this today, but it's out there. And that's how I heard about it. Parents are talking, teachers are talking, and I urge you to do what you can to keep this man, because I would follow him anywhere. He's a great leader, and I don't think we can lose him. And I don't know if he's thinking of leaving because of the dysfunctionality this gentleman was talking about or what, but I think everybody on that committee needs to start thinking, hey, we got a good thing here. We might be losing them. And I think that would be a shame, honestly. I've seen a lot of commanders in my time, and he's one of the best. Don't let him go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Skaggs.
Good evening. Sam Salvati, 5 East Court. I just had a question about the use of the Davisville Elementary building. This has been a topic of discussion in the past, and actually I have two questions. One, we talked in the past about the immediate residents being notified of any future topics of discussion or presentations with regard to the school, which had not happened for this discussion. And two, if this is a financial meeting, is there any way that the discussions of the elementary school could happen prior to all of the other agenda items, so that the residents that are here interested in the use of the school would not have to wait till the end of the meeting? Again, the residents that are here weren't informed that this was a topic of discussion prior to reading it in the newspaper. And again, we talked in the past, and we were told that the committee members were going to be sensitive to that issue, and make the residents aware of any future discussions and possibly put, a group of citizens and council members together to brainstorm and come up with ideas with the use of that facility, and that hasn't happened. So I was quite shocked to find out at 6:40 tonight that there was a meeting at 7 o'clock with this as an agenda item. So if there's anything that could be done this evening to accommodate us, I would appreciate it.
Dr. Thornton, go ahead.
Can I speak now on that?
Yes,
Okay.
please speak now.
First, in terms of planning, we had planned on a separate meeting on June 21st, I believe, for just a DE conversation at DMS. Unfortunately, we couldn't get a quorum for that night. But in terms of tonight's information, what I would tell the community is we are sensitive to not doing anything different with the building in terms of dramatically changing the concept. As you recall, last year, we talked about some options of bringing in some revenue, different places to rent space, et cetera. We really have tried to stay clear of that until we had that conversation. Right now, if you picture DE as kind of like this, kind of a U upside down, the main wing this past year has been occupied by Title I staff, and that's kind of been the people who kind of staff the building, if you will. We are looking at maybe doing some expansion with Title I or just special education, internal programming, but no real substantive changes in terms of any major transition. We talked last year about possibly using a food bank in the north, all those things. So really, we have put those on hold. I can tell you tonight, we did try one pilot, if memory serves, for this summer only, a group, Thunder Mist, Mr. Draper, Thunder Mist. We're renting out one space to Thunder Mist until August is up, just as a trial. But we're really waiting to have the meeting at DMS in that area of town to have the full-blown conversation. But right now, that's essentially it. So next year, when the year starts, most of the building would still be vacant, just the Title I. Maybe some special ed programming. We have one program we might try to bring back where, I don't know if you folks know, sometimes we have to give students training until they're 21, life skills, washer, dryer, a microwave, et cetera. We currently send those students across the state to get that programming done. We might have that classroom in DE, if you will. We have used some our money. We can have that in-house. So really, that's about it right now in terms of programming.
And what is the Thunder Mist program?
Medical.
Mr. Draper, Thunder Mist?
It's like a small satellite clinic. People would come in for routine physical type services.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm a member of the North Kingstown Arts Council, and they're interested in looking for space as well. I don't know if there's any way that the school committee and the Arts Council could work together and possibly find a combined utilization for that space for classroom use for the teachers and the Arts Council use as well.
I'd say yes. I think the next step really is to have a separate meeting just on that so we can explore all those. I know we met last time, I think it was Hamilton Elementary was the venue, and some of the residents who abutted the building were concerned about maybe making sure whatever we bring in is the right kind of clientele for the neighborhoods in the area.
Correct.
So that's kind of the conversation right now.
Correct. Thank you.
Kim?
Why don't we bring this after our consent agenda, and at that time, then we can have a more in-depth discussion on this.
Okay.
All right, any other, go ahead, more citizens' comment.
I'll be very brief because I know you have a lot of things to get to this evening. Gregory Blasbog, 70 Whitman Drive. I've stood here before and talked to you folks about things that have come up tonight, which is just the general interaction between various members of the committee. I'm going to mention it again because with the new chairperson, we have a potential for a turning point here. And what I'm talking about is that while it's extremely important for you folks to have a lively debate on all of the issues and explore the details that are necessary, there's a point where a decision needs to be made and we need to move on. And that's the only way the district's business is going to be done. And I just want to remind you about things that I think you already know, which is that we have a lot of difficult things that are coming up, one of which has been mentioned this evening, which is that we have the potential, unfortunately, of possibly needing to look for a new superintendent of schools. That's a decision that this committee would ultimately have to deal with. It's going to impact the path that this district takes for hopefully a very long time if that person stays on. Another thing that you know is that we have a diminishing fund balance that is being dipped into this year. likely will need to be dipped into again this year, likely dipped into next year, and then probably will be gone, which means that that's no longer available to balance our budgets. So now is the time we need to look forward to make those things happen. And unfortunately, the personal animosity that exists between various members gets in the way of that. And there's really no place for that on a committee. It's not going to help you get the work done. I think you need to step back, I've said it before, and put those things behind you and work together as best you can. And I thank you again for all the work you do.
Thank you. Is there any other citizens' comment? All right. Dr. Thornton, Superintendent Report.
Yes, good evening. One item for you this evening. RIDE is moving forward with the new teacher evaluation tool. The tool encompasses all teachers and all administrators. There was some talk in early June of trying to join the AFT tool with the RIDE tool. In the end, those talks didn't bear fruit. They didn't join, but they are going forward with the RIDE tool. We've been informed we have trainings beginning this summer. We have 10 different training dates or modules. Each one's around 3 hours long. In the fall, we have a pilot of the tool. So we're not being asked to do the full-blown tool, but we are being asked to have the protocol in place. So essentially, the big lift for us is we're being asked to evaluate every teacher in every building this first year as a baseline. So in terms of capacity, that will be a challenge, but the whole state's going through that right now. As more information comes online, I can certainly share it with you, but that's essentially what we have right now. First training date's late July right now.
All right. We now have routine items, executive session. While we don't have an executive session today, I know we have some items from the last executive session. Lorraine.
All members were present at the June 14th executive session, except for Larry Cerisi and Bill Mudge. Motion was made by Kim Page, seconded by Linda Avanzato, to recess executive session and go into open. Motion passed unanimously. Motion was made by Linda Avanzato, seconded by Kim Page, to adjourn executive session and go into open. Motion passed unanimously. Thank you.
All right, so now we,
Motion to seal.
yes, thank you. I appreciate that, Lorraine. So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion to seal the minutes from June 14th, 2011. Obviously, do we have anybody who needs to abstain?
Abstain.
Mr. Mudge and Mr. Cerisi abstain, so that means Mr. Thompson, myself, and Mrs. Avanzato. Do we vote aye?
Aye.
All members vote aye. Okay, the motion passes 3-0 with 2 abstentions. All right, and that brings us to the consent agenda. Are there motions, or I should say, are there items to exempt from the consent agenda? Mr. Thompson.
B1, C1, D2,
Oh, and we are removing D3. Am I correct, Dr. Thornton?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. D3 is the DMS canopy paint removal. Am I correct to say that we have not received any bids on that yet?
No, we received 2 bids. However, based on the specifications and some of the issues that came up during bidding, we're going to remove that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, what about, what's the action going to be then? Are we going to do the job, or was it the will of the committee to, in fact, do the paint job?
Mr. Draper, could you just expand on that? Will that be on our August agenda?
Yeah, we have some peeling paint at Davisville Middle, as well as some structural issues on one or more of the canopies. So we have to take another look at how the specifications are put together and how we want to approach the job.
this is the
underside. I'm moving on. Are there any other things that we're going to, if you'd like to have any questions, you can ask Mr. Draper later. But
Okay.
do we have any other items that we need to exempt? All right.
5, let's see, E5.
Any other items to exempt? Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion to pass the consent items agenda except for the exempt items. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I abstain.
Okay, we have a 4-0 vote with one abstention. All right, so let's look at the exemptions. Mr. Thompson, you exempted the work session minutes from June 14th.
Yes, exempted items, looks like it's on page, packet page 30. I would like, in order to perfect this meeting minutes, I'd like to move that the school committee reauthorize the April 26 Jamestown contract.
I second the motion.
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
The minutes have the vote of the Jamestown contract of April 26. So my motion, which has been seconded, is that the school committee, sitting here tonight, reauthorize the April 26 Jamestown contract. And that way, it's been seconded so we can have some discussion.
So you're merely asking for us to authorize the contract again?
Correct.
Point of order. I believe that motion is out of order. It's not on the agenda. Can that motion be made at this point in time?
I'm going to defer to our legal counsel because I'm not sure. Okay, so the question is, we have exempted the minutes from June 14th, in which during the minutes, we approved the minutes from April 28th. And in the minutes from April 28th, we approved the Jamestown contract.
April 26th.
I'm sorry, April 26th. So the motion is to reauthorize the Jamestown contract.
The motion has already been made to authorize the Jamestown contract.
Right.
That's correct.
So you approved the Jamestown contract. You've already approved it on April 26th.
That's correct also.
But you never approved the rate.
And I voted, wait a minute, I voted yes according to your records, so therefore I can bring it up for a reapproval, which is what I'm doing
No,
tonight.
you can bring it up for reconsideration.
Reconsideration.
Okay. So is that what you're bringing, is that what your motion is, to reconsider the motion?
I move that the school committee reauthorize the April 26 Jamestown contract.
I think that our attorney has told us that you can make a motion to reconsider the vote. So is that your motion?
But Madam,
yes.
sorry,
but
Madam
it's not
Chair,
on the
I think
agenda.
that would need to be something that's on an agenda, a reconsideration vote.
So is your motion to put this on at a later date to reconsider the vote?
Sure.
All right.
I second that.
Now, can we speak on this a little bit?
You don't need to vote.
I don't think we need to vote. I think you both have put this on for the August meeting, and we can discuss, we'd be discussing what?
But the only person that could make a motion and second a motion to reconsider a vote are people that voted in the affirmative.
So that's what Mr. Thompson is.
So Mr. Thompson would have to make the motion. Another person who voted in the affirmative would have to second the motion, and then the committee could vote if they want to reconsider the vote, and then you would take the vote all over again.
It was unanimous according to your records.
But Mr. Mudge wasn't here at that
Right,
time.
so I'm still open to reconsideration then.
Now, Mr. Mudge would be able to vote if the vote to reconsider takes place, and then he could vote on a new motion, except for the fact that you have already approved this contract, signed this contract, and Jamestown is now relying on this contract for the students to come here in September. So you would be getting yourselves into a major legal battle if you did something to now.
Madam Lawyer, I don't intend that it would not pass. I'm sure it will pass. What I'm intending to do is to say a few things about the Jamestown contract, which have been shut down by procedural ploys. And so it keeps coming up. It came up tonight. I was just spoken to by someone from Jamestown asking me, why do I keep bringing Jamestown up? The reason I keep bringing it up is because every time I try to talk about it, people say, point of order, and shut me down.
Mr. Thompson,
And if I
all
keep
right.
getting shut down, I will keep bringing it up.
But it's not on tonight's agenda.
I'm reading it right here, April 26th.
All right,
Mr.
I'm gonna
Thompson
bring us
stated
back
his
into
vote
focus
on the
here,
Jamestown
folks.
contract was not a vote at all.
I'm going to bring us back into focus. Right now, what has been exempted from the agenda is merely the work session minutes of June 14th, 2011. So that's what we're going to vote on. And Mr. Cerisi, you have a motion to make to approve those?
I have a comment to make before I make that motion.
Well, I'm only looking for a motion to approve the work session minutes of June 14th. I'm looking for a motion. All right, so I will make a motion to approve the work session minutes of June 14th, 2011. Can I get a second? Are we not going to approve the minutes of this? Okay. I'm going to move on because I'm not going to talk about anything except for right here what's on the consent agenda. I'm not going to go into any other thing. So unless we don't want to approve that, we can go back to it and we'll go to the monthly reports. So hearing no second, we won't approve those minutes tonight. Mr. Thompson, you had the monthly financial update.
I had a question.
You let him speak for 10 minutes. Can you recognize him?
Go ahead. What's your question, Mr. Thompson?
On the page 82 on the budget, for the final budget for fiscal 12, is there a current number that we can get tonight that tells us what our surplus figure is for the end of fiscal 11? And what will that roll over automatically into fiscal 12, the surplus?
If I understand your question correctly, you're talking about fiscal year 11.
Yes, the year we're in, which is just coming to an end.
Correct. That would be, and I'm firing it up now, I believe item A, which is the monthly deficit report. The estimate as of the month close in April was near break even. Let me see, it's not item A. I'm not seeing your page 82, that's why I want to make sure I'm looking at the same thing. It should be what's attached to your graph, Mr. Thompson. It's the City, Town of North Kingstown School Department School Fund Budget Report fiscal year. But to answer the question simply, the deficit report, I believe, was for between $4,000 and $5,000 to end in the black for this year. It could swing by $100,000 either way, depending on what happens with our final numbers, what purchase orders are closed down, what our inventories come back as. But we do not predict a deficit at this time. Is that the same document you're looking at, Mr. Thompson?
Mr. Thompson, did you have a question about this?
He's saying 4,000.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes, 4,000 surplus.
Yeah, that's what's in this month's, the April month-end close deficit report.
Good question.
Go ahead.
May I have a
Yes,
question?
Mr. Mudge.
What does this funding include? That doesn't include the deficit we had for the cafeteria, does it?
No, that's applied to fund balance. That, a matter of fact, that's a separate action for,
But shouldn't it still show as a deficit requiring school committee special authorization, which we haven't gotten yet?
That's tonight on your agenda.
it's a separate item on your agenda.
But my point is, you got a report for April that doesn't include that. Why not?
It would not, because it would be applied to fund balance.
It's a deficit, okay? It's an expenditure deficit. It's a deficit. How it's funded is separate and distinct. You should be showing the deficit, and then you should be showing a similar funding line item to correct the deficit. And I would also say what's lacking in this submittal to the Department of Education is, have you notified the Department of Education that you've got a $175,000 cafeteria funds deficit?
All right,
I
I'm
asked
good.
that 3 months ago, and I would like to know, have we notified the Auditor General of this deficit?
I'm going to jump in here because I believe that Ms. Carroll has researched this question and can answer that.
I gave you a report, actually gave you a letter responding to that a couple of months ago. But it's if my recollection, I don't have the letter in front of me, if my recollection is right, this school committee took action at the beginning of the 2011 fiscal year to use fund balance to put into the cafeteria account. The same way when you approved the budget this year, you took how much money out of fund balance?
Yeah, it's
For your
about
regular budget.
75,000. And that was based on the potential for labor concessions in these
Right, but
negotiations.
So what was that number, please?
No, but you took fund balance money this year to balance your fiscal year 2012 balance, correct?
Correct.
Same way, last year, you took money out of your surplus to put into your cafeteria account. It was over 100,000. This year, you're looking to put 75. You don't have a deficit if you've already taken the money out of your fund balance and applied it to that account.
That hasn't happened.
Yes.
What account? And by the way,
It did
there happens to
happen.
be...
1% at a time. Ms. Carroll.
Mr. Mudge, before you came on the committee, last year around this time, this committee took money out of fund balance and applied it to the cafeteria account so that the cafeteria account would not show a deficit.
For fiscal year 10.
For fiscal year 11, they did it in anticipation of the fact.
What was the amount they took out?
I don't have my notes in front of me because I don't know, but wasn't it about 100,000 that you showed? There was a motion to apply fund balance to the cafeteria account.
And now it's 100, but it's, the fiscal year deficit for 11 is $175,000?
Yes, and so that is on our agenda next, I mean, not next, but
Okay.
it is on our agenda eventually that we will have to make that approval. So that is something we will get to.
But...
Are there further
But,
questions on this report?
Madam Chairman, I still haven't been answered. Have we identified this to the attorney, the Auditor General?
And I believe that Ms. Carroll has answered
Well,
that.
no, she hasn't, because the answer that she did give us before was absolutely incorrect because of two things. One,
All right, so
we
it
are
sounds
talking a
like
general fund, madam, and we're talking about a school cafeteria fund, and they're separate and distinct. They're an enterprise fund. And there's no correlation between the general fund and the enterprise fund, and we did not identify that deficit to the Auditor General.
Okay, there is a difference of opinion. I'm going to move on to somebody else. Mr. Thompson.
Well, when there's a difference of opinion, what should we do to try to resolve the differences of opinion?
Yes, we have had an opinion from the attorney. You do not agree with it. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you. I'm going back on that question, and when I was referring to the surplus, Mr. Draper, when I was referring to the surplus, I was talking about the fund balance. And have we got the same term of art? Is the surplus and the fund balance, are those two the same identical things?
Those are, if I'm understanding your question correctly, those are two different things we're asking about. For fiscal year 11, your question regarding about $4,000, or it could be plus or minus around $100,000 on our budget, is how we end the year relative to our budget. So that's meaning out of roughly $60 million in expenditures.
Yep.
We calculate that we're going to be within $100,000 of being in the black. So we're saying, based on where we thought we were going to spend throughout the course of the operation of the year, we think we're going to break even, be pretty close to break even. Now, fund balance is a separate and distinct item. That is the amount of funds that have been accumulated over time, plus or minus the budgets over past years. That number right now stands at a little over $2 million.
Okay, it's $2 million, and tonight we're going to extract something like 100,000 or so from it.
I don't think it's quite that much.
75,
Yeah.
something
Yep.
there. So we're going to have something like $1.5 or $1.75 million in the fund balance.
$2 million.
No, you'll have about $2 million.
We'll have about $2 million in the fund balance. Now, does that automatically just roll over into fiscal 12?
Correct.
Under fund balance?
Correct.
So we've still got $2 million of fund balance?
Correct.
Which is known to the general public as the surplus.
Correct.
They think of that as when we go out and talk about our surplus, that's what we're talking about, $2 million.
Yes.
Thank you.
And now, I want the committee to understand, you've made a commitment of roughly 1.1 million, 1.150 of fund balance to operate in fiscal year 12.
Which means starting out in fiscal 12, our fund balance will, right out of the box, will be what?
Roughly 900,000.
900K.
I saw a hand to my right. Is there still a question?
I have a question. I have a comment. And I need to ask a question to answer Mr. Mudge's question. When you took the action at the beginning of the fiscal year 2011 to use surplus funds to cover the enterprise account, did the funds that you take totally cover the deficit in that enterprise account?
No.
For 2010, yes.
I'm talking about 2011, which we're ending right here, Mr.
No,
Mudge.
because that wasn't
All right,
addressed.
let's one at a time. Ms. Carroll has the floor.
As a result of the food services account, because of that enterprise account, as it stands right now today, is that causing your overall budget for 2011 to show a deficit?
It does not appear that it will, no.
All right, so so let me just clarify. If that account had such a deficit that even after you took the money out of the surplus at the beginning of the year, if that deficit from that food services account caused your overall budget at the end of the 2011 fiscal year, like as of Thursday, to show a deficit, then you would need to report that budget to the Auditor General, saying that you had a deficit and explaining how you were going to correct that deficit.
Right.
So Mr. Mudge is half right on what he's saying.
But that interpretation is complicated by the fact that the committee has committed fund balance in advance
Right.
of this operating year.
And I know that, and that's why, what I'm saying is, let's say, for example, that the food enterprise account runs a deficit of $175,000, and you only committed $100,000 for that account. When you took the action in last year, you only committed $100,000. That means that account is showing a deficit of $75,000. And if your budget, overall budget now, does not have enough surplus to cover that $75,000, so at the end of the day, you're showing a deficit in the overall budget, you were required to notify the Auditor General and explain to the Auditor General how you were covering that deficit. And the way you're covering that deficit is to take more surplus, correct?
That would be in the absence of committee action.
Right.
Yeah, but that's the process.
Okay, so Mr. Mudge, I think your question, what your question is if the enterprise account causes the overall budget to be in a deficit, should we notify the Auditor General? My legal opinion is absolutely. We do have to notify the Auditor General.
Yes, but I might say the reason that would be.
Let her finish.
However.
Because it is an enterprise fund.
Please, let her finish.
I don't disagree with you.
Yes.
But what Mr. Draper is telling me is that the overall bottom line of this budget, when all the numbers are fixed and we're down to June 30th, if the overall bottom line is not at a deficit, then there's no need for notification.
Well, yeah, no, it is because of two budget. You see,
Are you
there's
finished, Ms. Carroll?
I'm finished.
Mr. Mudge, do you have a question? I think
There is
but
a school fund.
Hold on. I like to take people in order, so did I see a hand up to my right? Okay.
Yes.
Did you have it up before? I mean, not just now.
Yeah.
I had it up about 5 minutes ago.
Okay.
I'm going to defer. I'm going to let
Go
Mr.
ahead,
Mudge finish.
Mr.
and then
Mudge.
I'll say-
Sorry.
See, Madam Counsel, we have a real problem. In fact, there's a thing on the agenda tonight about the budget, the school budgets, okay, which needs to be really rewritten because it's inappropriate. The fact of the matter is, we have a couple of things. It's called the appropriated school budget by the town council. That's a specific number. That's what we report to the public. It's a report to the Department of Education. That does not include the enterprise fund account, a separate budget of the school department, just like the golf course is a separate part of the municipal budget, and the library is separate. They are separate and distinct issues. And the school fund, okay, budget does not include that. So it is a separate and distinct function that must be reported to the Auditor General.
I think, Mr. Mudge, you and I need to discuss this. I mean, I think we have a difference of opinion. I'm saying you're right if it causes an overall deficit and it needs to be reported. They're telling me there isn't an overall deficit, so if there is no overall deficit, then it doesn't have to be reported. But if there was, then it should have been reported. But it's now the end of the year. We're fixing it. So aren't we arguing over nothing right now?
No, Madam Chair, because, you see, it's not the general fund, the appropriated budget that's an issue. This is not part of it. It is a separate budget. And that budget in itself went over. It was an $800,000 budget. The school capital reserve, in fact, the town council never even appropriated the enterprise fund, nor did the school committee appropriate the enterprise fund. We have only approved the general fund budget. We have several budgets, as you may know. One, the general fund, the enterprise fund accounts, as well as all the grant budgets. For example, all the grant budgets aren't in the $56 million, right? This is a different budget.
Right, but it's being, at this point now, what are we arguing over?
Well, we're arguing the
All right,
fact
I'm
that we
going to
have
call
this
on
separate...
somebody else. I'm going to ask Mrs. Avanzato. You may speak.
I just want to make a quick comment. Several members of the public and the press have made comments about members of this committee not getting along and that having something to do with the superintendent leaving. Myself, I think the superintendent is probably leaving because of just such what we see going on at this table right now.
Oh, thank you.
And it has nothing to do with arguing between the members. It has to do with the behavior of certain members.
All right, let's go back to the financial reports.
That's what it is.
We have the financial reports here. If there's no other comment on financial reports, then I'm looking for a motion to approve the financial reports.
Motion to approve.
I have a question.
Is there a second?
What's the financial report for the cafeteria fund, which is separate and distinct than the
Okay, we've already
budget
gone
here?
over it. There's a motion on the floor. I am ready to take a vote. Do we need a roll call vote? Okay, then all in favor of all in favor of passing the financial reports, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, the next item on our agenda is the bid for the gym floor.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Mr. Thompson, you had discussion on this item.
Just took a look at the condition of those 3 floors, and the covering is worn away. I definitely think we're doing the right thing by approving this for the year. I also noted when I was in there that there's a lot of activity going on, especially here in Gym 2. So I just wanted to give a heads up to Mr. Draper that to make sure that when the people come in to do the refinishing, that we coordinate this with the whatever groups are using the gyms, because they're in pretty heavy usage during the day. That was all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any other comments before we vote? Okay, all in favor of refinishing the gym floor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we had E5, resignation of truant officer.
My question on that was simply, do we have a plan for the duties and the functions of the truant officer to be accomplished? And is it going to be are we going to hire another truant officer, or is there a possibility that we could combine these functions with some of the things that Dr. Thornton's been looking for? For example, I know he's looking for some more help in the guidance area, and I just thought there might be a fit if we looked at a way of combining functions. So that was why I wanted to pull that one.
If that hasn't been the plan as of late, we have posted for this part-time job at this point. We had not considered any combination at this point.
Are we still going to offer a full benefits package on that one?
No, we are not.
Thank you.
Motion to approve.
Okay, motion, is there a second?
Second?
Okay, all those in favor of approving the resignation of the truant officers, vote aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. We had one other item which we didn't complete. We had the approval of the minutes from 6/14/2011. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
If I was there.
I'll second that. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Abstain.
Okay, thank you very much. We're off the consent agenda. I'm sorry, I did not do a better job of keeping us on task. So now we go to, I said I would bring up under number H, the use of the Davisville Elementary Building. So,
I would excuse myself.
thank you, Mr. Mudge. So if we could talk about that now, since we have folks here. Dr. Thornton, would you like to speak on that item?
I think I laid out the foundation earlier. In terms of expansion, the only thing I would say is I really think it'd be helpful to have a one-agenda meeting on that topic to go deep. I know some of the pushback we received last year really revolved around, I think, the types of folks we may pull in. Right now, the question I would always pose to the committee would be, even if we fill some of the classrooms internally with Title I and IDEA, special education, at what point do we or should we have the whole boiler fired up, if you will? Right now, we have a zone heating system in the front, but we're not keeping the boiler on high, if you will. At some point, if we keep populating the classrooms with programming, we'll have to fire the boiler up and spend more. So right now, I think I really need some sense of guidance from the town and the committee as to what kinds of things you want to see in the building, aside from Title I and IDEA.
Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know the superintendent has tried to set a date for the committee to have a special meeting for this one agenda topic, and we've been unable to get a date in which we can have a quorum of committee members. And it is a subject that's going to require some length of time to discuss and to be able to provide some direction or some consensus to the superintendent on this matter. So what I would suggest at this time, I know we have July as our break, maybe sometime in August when we reconvene, we can finally nail down a date for that special meeting and have this one agenda item. And also we could put some effort into making sure that we inform the public of the agenda item as well, so all parties that are interested can be well informed and be out for the meeting. So that's what I'm asking at this time is, again, we look for a date in August.
Mr. Thompson.
I'd also like to suggest that we have a budget subcommittee meeting on August 22nd at 1 o'clock, and to the extent that there's financial issues involved, such as firing up the boiler and so on, or rents that we may collect, or whatever's financial about this Davisville Elementary, that we could add that to the agenda, if we could add that to the agenda, and maybe touch on that at the budget subcommittee on August 22nd. And I'm asking for that to be added to the agenda for that meeting.
All right. We can inform the subcommittee of that. Right now, we have school committee meeting on August 9th, and we have school committee meeting on August 23rd. The week that we do not have is the August 16th. Is there, and that's a Tuesday. Is there any, I know that people may not have their calendars with them tonight, but would that be a time off your head where people could say that we should look at, or should we look at a different day of the week?
We could just maybe, so we're not kind of going back and forth with everyone's calendars right now, maybe just have the clerk pull the committee over the next week or two and try to set a date in advance, and we'll stick to it.
Okay. So you will all be receiving email, and I know under the Attorney General's what you can discuss in email, that finding a date to all meet is no problem. They have specifically stated that. So we'll ask the clerk to poll for, we can put out more than one date. So, but, and then hopefully then that we'll advertise that so the folks up in the Davisville area will know when we are going to be meeting on that item. Are there any other discussion on this matter? All right. Then that's where we are headed. So now let's go back to unfinished business. Mr. Cerisi.
Unfinished business, A1, fund balance to cafeteria deficit recommendation of the superintendent. At this time, I'll make a motion to approve that recommendation.
Second.
Okay, is there further discussion? I believe the superintendent's recommendation is to use fund balance to cover the deficit. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Is there any discussion? All right, and there's a motion on the floor. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Thank you very much. All right. The next item is school budget incentive pay. Dr. Thornton, this came out of our discussion via the Budget Committee.
It did. I think in the Budget Committee, there were two conversations. First, previous action by the school committee had reduced the incentive pool down to, I believe, $15K, and there was some talk of taking some undesignated funds and putting it back into that line. Funds, when the committee took an action to give several administrators zero, that freed up some monies, approximately, say, $10,000, $12,000. And then also, when the committee did not act on a recommendation to increase a salary for an administrator, that also freed up another pot of money. So approximately, not the exact number, approximately $20,000 is unspoken for, if you will, in the budget book. So the conversation, I think, in the subcommittee was, could we bring that up here and have the conversation?
Mr. Cerisi.
Madam Chair, I'm sure you recall lengthy discussions on the past, with the past school committee on policy GCB,
right.
Which at the time you were chair of the policy subcommittee. I know yourself and the other members of that subcommittee, as well as the full committee, put a tremendous amount of time into that development of that policy. And I believe as part of that policy, we talked about trying to be more in line with what the Department of Education was doing, and not just giving automatic pay raises, but more performance-based pay incentive, or performance incentive pay increases rather than automatic pay increases. And I thought the superintendent and the policy subcommittee and the full school committee did a really good job with that, and I think we actually turned the corner and going into a direction that I think is long overdue, and I think it coincides with the plan that we see coming slowly forward from the Department of Ed. I was a little bit disappointed, and I may have voted in favor of it. I don't even recall, but I was a little bit disappointed when we adopted the budget. We had impacted that work that we had done previously on the committee, and I think we really need to recommit some funds to that. So it's something that, as I said, we've supported previously. I'd continue to support that. I don't know if there's a particular motion to be made tonight.
There would be.
I guess I would just motion that we reinstate the incentive pay line to the 2011-12 budget, and where that specific transfer is going to come from would come from a recommendation from the superintendent at our next meeting, and we can approve that budget transaction or that budget transfer at our next meeting. But at this time, I'd motion that we move forward with that.
I think that we could probably move forward with that today, in that basically right now, and what we discussed in the budget subcommittee was we had these funds that were cut from other items,
okay.
And so now they are undesignated.
Right.
And so it's merely, rather than having them be undesignated, should we put them into the incentive or merit?
I'll restate my motion to make it more definitive then.
Okay.
At this time, I will motion to approve the superintendent's recommendation to designate those undesignated budgetary funds to the incentive pay line item in the budget.
Second that, and I have a question of
Okay. So
subcommittee
second,
members.
you want to go first, or?
I just have a question I was going to ask anyone who was at the budget subcommittee whether they discussed it and what their thoughts were on it.
We did, but my question was going to be now, how much are we talking about?
I don't know the exact number, Joe, but if memory serves, there were approximately 8 or so administrators that we gave zeros to, and those were in the budget book for 1%. So those are savings. And then there was one central office employee that was not elevated, and that was another $8.5K. So I want to say all in, we're approximately $20K.
So are we going to vote on a specific number or not? That was my only question.
But
No,
if you
I
give
don't
us
think
one-
there is a specific number.
Okay,
So,
actually, give us 1 second. Mr. Draper has the laptop open. We can get the exact numbers if you want.
Mr. Cerisi.
I just want to make it clear that what we're doing here is we're reinstating that line item in the budget. We're not voting
Right.
to give one person or a group of person pay
No.
raises. We're reinstating that line item in the budget, which will give the superintendent the ability to make those recommendations when he does his evaluations of those employees. If they've obtained those goals and objectives that he outlines in their performance evaluation, then it gives him the ability to move forward with the pay incentives. So we're just, right now, what we're doing is authorizing that money to be moved back into that line item in the budget.
I think that was our recommendation.
Correct.
From the Budget Subcommittee.
All right, so we do have a motion on the floor, and we have a second. Do you all want to wait? I don't know, Mr. Draper, how easy these numbers are to pull out?
To give you a definitive number, I'd have to do some digging, but you could use the $20,000 number for now, because remember, that was the reduction from the merit pay before.
All right, is there any further discussion?
Can we modify that to make it $20K? That we would make a line item of $20K in the budget? And this is for fiscal 11 or for fiscal 12?
Fiscal year 12.
Fiscal 12.
It could be stated as a merit pay item.
We have a motion on the floor right now. Lorraine, could you read the motion back, please?
Larry Cerisi's motion was to reinstate the line item incentive pay to the fiscal year 12 budget.
If it
Did we
makes it-
amend the 20,000? Did you want to add that too?
If it makes it procedurally easier, we'll call it an exact amount of $20,000.
Okay, so we'll add
Thank
the
you.
amount of
Add that
$20,000.
to the, yeah, you could add that to the original motion. Thank you.
All right. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, the next is just generally the FY 2012 school general fund budget. Do you have anything further to add on that, Dr. Thornton?
Nothing at this time.
Do you have anything to add on the CIP existing bond, future bond?
The one conversation there would be from the State House. We are hearing more disturbing news in terms of, as you know, the CIP conversation is really akin to our Phase 2 submission. We had originally, or heard earlier, that possibly towns like North Kingstown that had submissions in the queue might be held harmless as far as not having all of the work frozen. As you might have heard, the state has frozen all reimbursements for 3 years for projects. We had hoped we'd be held harmless. We're hearing now that may not be the case. We may be in with the rest of the state in a 3-year freeze, if you will. So that's unfortunate. After all the work we've done, it may be that we're back in the queue with the whole state waiting for the freeze to come off.
That is unfortunate. I did see that in the financial report that basically they weren't, they were concerned about the Wickford Middle School. Mr. Cerisi, did you have your hand up?
No, I'm sorry,
Okay.
I'm waiting,
Nope.
actually, on the next agenda. right
Okay,
now.
let's go to the next agenda item, the septic change, maintenance change order.
At this time, I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation for the change order.
Do I have a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the septic maintenance change order? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Thank you. All right, so that brings us to the coaching policy. This is a second read. Mr. Cerisi.
I just want to thank the administration and the policy subcommittee for their work on that, and I know this originally resulted from parts of this originally resulted from a parent complaint that we had, I believe, going back to a year or two ago. So, and I just want to thank the administration and some school committee members for seeing this policy through. So at this time, I'll make a motion to approve the policy GCA.
Second.
Any further discussion? I will say what this policy will do is make it so that Mr. Marcello or anyone who is our athletic director will be doing an evaluation on all the coaches every year, and that he will provide them with feedback And there would be the opportunity that any parent or student who is under the coach would also be able to provide feedback, and that would be taken into consideration. If a person did not feel comfortable in talking to one or two of them, they can also go through, of course, the principal. So, any other comments? Mrs. Avanzato.
I think it'll be very useful for coaches, but parents as well are happy about it. Had a number of parents requesting this kind of thing, and I would just ask that we send this policy after it's approved to the parent that Mr. Cerisi was referring to, because I believe he expressed an interest in seeing it when we got to the finished product. So, thank you.
Mr. Cerisi, just remind me to email it to you, and you can pass it on.
Okay.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay. Motion passes. We next have the grading policy. Mr. Cerisi.
Motion to approve the IKA and IKA.1 grading policies.
Second.
Mr. Thompson.
Question for Dr. Auger. Can you say a couple of things about how this got passed through, and especially about the teachers' groups that looked into them and, you know, their feelings about it and how this is going to be good for us?
Sure. This started taking shape in the fall. Earliest meetings were in October, and both the high school and the middle school groups, including lots of teachers, a school committee member, parents, even some students were involved in the discussions. Grading is, it's something we've all been through as students and many of us as teachers, and it's something that I think we go about in our daily lives and never really give a lot of thought about, and much less, collaborate with our peers. And what this policy does is it asks teachers, requires teachers who teach a similar course at a similar grade level to collaborate with one another to determine how grades will be formulated so that they are together in that formulation, not miles apart. It also requires that we look closely at when students really do poorly. If they get a 0 on assignment, for instance, or they don't do the assignment, how will we respond? It's not necessarily fair if one teacher right now would say, I'm going to give a student a lot of second chances, and other teachers have policies where they don't give any second chances to get that work done and make up some credit. So the policies do a lot to keep scoring consistent when it comes to grading, and to be consistent in our approach to how we would support students who really do poorly on assignments or just haven't done them, and they need to make up that work. So,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Avanzato.
I just want to thank Dr. Auger and all the teachers and everyone who worked on this policy. It's been worked on for a very long time, and it started out with us brainstorming, holding numbers in the front of the auditorium. Remember that? And so I know a lot of time and a lot of work went into it, and a lot of discussion about homework and a lot of different facets of grading. And I think you came up with a really good compromise. I know you had to compromise some of the things that you wanted in here, but it's pretty much what everybody was comfortable with and what you could, move forward with. So I just want to thank you for all your work on this.
Thank you. I agree. There was a lot of compromise on behalf of a lot of people, and I think we have a better policy because of that.
All right. Any other comments on this policy? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. All right. That brings us to DBC, the annual budget policy. This only has to be one read because this is a policy that we are updating. So you already have it on the books. It is merely updating it. And this came from Mr. Draper because this brings the policy in line with the UCOA policy. I'm looking for a motion. And
Well, I have a motion.
go ahead, Mr. Thompson.
I might not get a second, but I would like to move that this policy DBC be submitted to the Budget Subcommittee for its next meeting in order for a full discussion and recommendations back to the full committee.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Okay, discussion. Yes, Mrs. Avanzato.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind just a little bit more time with the policy, because it's obviously an important one, and just hearing back from the Budget Subcommittee and maybe just a little bit more feedback before we move forward on it. It looks like there's a lot in here. It looks like a good policy, but I'd like to get some recommendations on it.
All right. Well, I have no problem with sending that back over from one committee to the other. So that was probably something that we should have thought about in the policy committee, and didn't really dawn on us when we were having those discussions to pass it over to policy. So, Mr. Draper.
The only thing I would say to keep us in GASB compliance, and I think possibly I would defer to Mary Ann on advice on this. There's GASB advice, which is the Governmental Accounting Standards, that says we're supposed to break out our fund balances in a different method now. That's the tail end of that policy. So in addition to UCOA, there's also the requirement that by the end of this fiscal year, we be in compliance with the fund balance side of it. That's not to say, since we're subordinate to the town, and I believe the town has also put in a similar set of policy language that indicates how fund balance is supposed to be reported and recorded, I think we can rest on theirs, but I would ask Mary Ann just to confirm that would be the case.
And there is isn't there a July 1st requirement?
Correct.
And this is the last meeting that we have prior to July 1st.
And I would also offer to the committee that even if you were to approve it this evening, it can go back to the committee any number of times for modification or changes, depending on the results of the subcommittee.
All right, so easily, and since this is a policy we already have and we're amending, we could make the amendment tonight, still pass it over to the Budget Committee. If they have any further changes, then we can come back and approve it in August with more changes. So we have a motion on the table to send it to the Budget Committee. Am I correct? Is that how the motion is worded?
Yes.
All right.
So we can to the Budget Subcommittee.
So we can still approve that, and then we can, but we can also then approve the policy. So let's take a motion. Just take the motion on the table to send it to the Budget Subcommittee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay. Now I'm looking for another motion to approve DBC.
So move.
Second.
Any further questions? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right. So we've approved the changes, but we will still send it over to the Budget Subcommittee. All right, Mr. Thompson.
All right, G, are we on?
We are on G.
All right, this also came out of the Budget Subcommittee, and we are recommending that the full committee, go ahead.
No, please finish.
We're recommending that the full committee send the reorganization package over to the official consolidation committee, which consists of Charlie Stamm for the town and Bill Mudge for the schools, and to ask them to report back to us in a timely fashion as to their thoughts about this reorganization in conjunction with consolidation issues. That's the report from the Budget Subcommittee.
All right, Mrs. Avanzato.
A couple of things on this. In terms of sending it over to the Consolidation Subcommittee, not that of course I welcome their opinion, but that's a town school subcommittee, and this is solely a school department reorganization, just within the school department. I'm not ready to, pass it as is. I've got some hesitation about some of the changes within there. The idea is a very good one. I just wanted to mention that Mr. Cerisi, I think like 2 years ago, came forward with the idea of doing a consolidation like this and had tried to get that passed then. As financial pressures tightened, now we're back looking at it again. I'm wondering if maybe the Budget Subcommittee would be a better place to look at it, though, as far as a subcommittee, because I don't know that the town really has any say in how we organize our own, you know?
I'm going to jump in, because it was my remembrance, and I was just looking up if I still had my budget subcommittee minutes on here, which I don't. So, but it was my remembering that while we said we could hand this off, it didn't preclude us from doing anything in this meeting, that we weren't going to necessarily, because we've had some discussion on a variety of, we had more of a discussion in the subcommittee, or maybe we had, on how we were going to, or we had less of a discussion about payroll and more of a discussion on some of the maintenance issues.
Maintenance, yeah.
So that's why I'm like, so I guess I'm going to, I know you have your hand up, Mr. Cerisi. I'll call on you next, but then I would like to hear from Dr. Thornton. So go ahead, Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know a lot of work is going into this plan, and I'm glad that we finally have this back in front of us. As Mrs. Avizano had mentioned, I brought this to the committee 3 years ago, and unfortunately at that time it didn't pass. So I'm glad that we have this plan back before us. I do support the concept of this internal consolidation, which again was what I was hoping for previously. The only troubles, the only objections that I have to what we currently have before us is I can totally support the additional pay for the additional duties for the Director of Administration, as well as whoever the leads will be. The other areas, plant and grounds clerk, materials clerk, as I've said before, I can't support those increases. I'm struggling to find the change in their job description or the change in their workload, whereas for the others, I see the change in their job description, I see the change in their workload, and I can fully support that. Maybe the others were asking to do slightly more work, but I think that's what times call for. We're asking everybody to do more with less. There are other people in central office that we've asked to do more, and we haven't increased their salaries. I know over the last several years, we significantly reduced staffing in the Human Resources Office, and I think payroll is going to be reduced as well. We've asked them to do more with less. We're asking staff out at the schools to do more with less. We're asking our custodians to do more with less. We have to measure everyone with the same stick. We can't ask another group to do more, but we're going to give them more, while we ask the other groups to do more, but we're going to give them less. I think it creates a real dissension amongst the ranks, and I've actually talked to some employees at central office who've contacted me, and this does really create a divide. So I'm not going to support the plan with the increases for those other positions that I outlined. However, I will support it with the increases for the director and the 3 leads from the maintenance crews. I understand that, and actually when I put this proposal forward 3 years ago, that was the proposal exactly that I put forward, was to eliminate one supervisor's position and consolidate it in and give those other positions a pay increase for the additional work and the additional time that they would be put in. The original idea that I put forward did not include a pay increase for the other positions that I separated out. So, thank you.
Dr. Thornton and then Mr. Thompson.
Just one piece to add. If you look at the flow chart, probably the easiest way to kind of talk about this, and one piece to add would be also you all realize this is subject to negotiations with ESP. We actually did meet with them today, and we had a conversation on one piece. If you look down to the second row down, we talked about the payroll, plants and grounds, clerk data entry. That was our focus today. And for that conversation, we talked about how the current person in the payroll clerk position is now the new payroll supervisor. The job that's vacant, we talked today about how we're modeling it being 20 hours in payroll, 20 hours in the plants and grounds office. In this conversation, we did try to weigh apples to apples and try to see, the value added. Clerks, I believe, have 3 levels of pay grade. In this conversation, we did consent, and want to bring to the committee the request to make that payroll clerk a senior clerk, if you will, given the load. What that means to the committee is we're asking for 50 more cents an hour for that position to make it a level clerk. That's just called a senior clerk because of the load that does seem to be there. The other positions certainly.
Dr. Thornton, you said 50, not 15, correct?
0.50.
Okay, just clarification.
The top row there, certainly open for conversation. And on that top row, we really did, I think, we've all kind of struggled with trying to get comps for those or fair market value. So the number we have in our draft here is just our first shot at it. But really, I would welcome conversation on trying to get comps or trying to do what Larry talked about is, when is the tipping point where you do something else? How do you measure that threshold? But so tonight, as far as conversation, I really welcome it. Any subgroup, that's great. But I would ask the committee to consider that second row tonight. That job is crucial in that we feel if we don't fill that, we may be running we may be running the risk of payroll every 2 weeks goes out. It's a crucial position. ESP Union has informed us that they would be okay with us posting it if it was a senior clerk. That, in terms of posting it, it's promotional. People can, bid into the job, if you will. So that's the only action tonight. Otherwise, a conversation from the subgroups is fine.
All right, so my clarification is that on the second chart where you talk about the payroll supervisor, that you are looking for an approval to split out the position that is being vacated into two different areas of responsibility.
Correct. The current vacancy is a full-time payroll clerk. We're going to only fill half that job and slide the other 20 hours to the office next door, which is the Plants and Grounds office. Mr. Cahoon, over 30 years, had many responsibilities and did several different areas. This whole reorg is trying to capture all the things that he did, and this 120-hour piece is one piece of that.
And so then any conversation we have about the other reorganization, it sounds like committee members aren't tonight prepared to talk about any money.
Right.
But perhaps we should have more of a discussion after we take the first item about how we want to reorganize. Okay, Mr. Thompson, and Mr. Cerisi.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we look at that one specific position that Dr. Thornton has just talked about and give our approval as a full committee tonight so that Dr. Thornton can go back in with the negotiation process and that we would approve what he just said, the split position as a lead.
So the senior account clerk's position.
Senior account clerk, yep.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Cerisi.
I think just to make it a little bit less confusing, to make sure we capture everything here, I can certainly support the plan as is, and I think that's what Dr. Thornton's looking for this evening. I think the monetary value assigned to the positions will require some additional discussion on the part of the committee, and maybe a little bit more additional information will help clarify some things. And quite frankly, perhaps I don't have all my facts in order, and when I do, maybe I'll have a better understanding of this and be prepared to move forward on the monetary value assigned to these positions. But I certainly will support the plan itself. So to enable Dr. Thornton to have some direction from the committee and move forward with this plan, I'll make a motion.
There's already a motion.
Oh, okay. Is there a second?
Let me just try to split this out. What we need to do as a committee as a whole, if you approve, is to break out the budget portion of the job and approve that for tonight. And then the second part of that is to take the other parts of this wiring diagram, which deal with maintenance primarily, and you've been asked, and you don't have to do it, but you've been asked to submit that over to the consolidation committee, which we have made many protestations from this podium that we're interested in supporting the work of that committee. And this is an area where there are jobs on that wiring chart that might be of interest for consolidation purposes. And so we brought this up from the subcommittee, but it's kind of gone in two directions here. So I just want to, let me just deal with the first one first, and that would be the one that Dr. Thornton needs to speak to as far as the ESP.
All I need tonight,
I don't think we have a motion on the floor, do we?
Yeah, I did.
Yes.
Oh, it's not been
No,
seconded.
it has not.
just for clarity, all I need tonight is for the committee to consider allowing us to post this one position. The rest of it certainly is a conversation, as Larry said, about salary, et cetera, the wiring chart. That one second-row position, we believe, is really crucial, getting payrolls out in a timely fashion. So not to fill that would make me nervous. So otherwise, I think we can certainly have a conversation on all those other slots.
So my motion was to move that particular job tonight.
All right. Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's been there's a motion on the floor. I don't think it's received a second. If it hasn't, it's going to die. And I'm going to, as I said, I'm just going to offer a motion to approve the plan, which I think will make this a lot less complicated, which gives the superintendent the directions he's looking for. And we can certainly get back to the budgetary aspect of it at another time, which he doesn't need this evening. So I defer to you, Madam Chair. There's a motion on the floor.
Yeah, there's no second, so I'm looking for a motion.
I'm going to make a motion to approve the plan as presented and recommended by the superintendent, with the caveat that we will be just approving the plan this evening, and as far as the budget impact and salaries, we'll get back to that discussion on our next agenda.
I'll second that.
Mr. Thompson, and then Mrs. Avanzato.
All right. I hope I'm not repeating myself. We have been saying all along that we're looking for consolidation opportunities with the town and the school department. This is an ideal time and an ideal opportunity to realize consolidation opportunities. The Budget Subcommittee went through some pretty long discussions and came up with the concept of shipping this plan over to the Consolidation Committee to get their ideas of how can we save money for the town by combining some of the functions that are listed in here, so that if you approve tonight this motion that you've just made, you are precluding the possibility of savings that could be derived from consolidation of this plan with something that might also be being considered by the town. I hope I'm clear on that. So that is why I'm going to vote no on the motion that was just made. And I'm hoping that we can ship this entire plan, with the exception of the job that I mentioned before, that we can ship it to the Consolidation Committee.
Mrs. Avanzato?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little, I have no problem with the Consolidation Committee looking at this, but as I said, I think we have a plan that's been put forth by operations at the school department. I don't want to hold Dr. Thornton back with what he needs to move forward. I'm not ready to move forward on the budgetary aspects of it. I don't have a problem, like I said, I prefer the Budget Subcommittee of our committee looking at it as well. I really don't have a problem with consolidation, taking a look and seeing if there's other opportunities.
I'll speak and then I'll let Joe. I think that what we need to consider is that we have June 30th on Thursday, and we have folks who are retiring as of Thursday. So let's say the Consolidation Committee meets tomorrow. On Friday, we need to start having people perform their jobs. And so it's one of those things of, we can still send this over to the Consolidation Committee and at the same time be moving forward of posting this, of making sure that things are filled. Just because the Consolidation Committee says, yeah, we think there are places here, does not preclude us from some time later saying, you know, we are going to basically merge with the town on some of these responsibilities. Yes, it's always easier when you have somebody who is retiring and leaving to merge at that point. But I still don't think that that would preclude us from doing a lot of these functions later. It's not as if that these things still won't need done, that we still can't do some overlap, that we couldn't do a different reorganization later. But I think because, like I said, retirement is, Thursday. and this is Tuesday, that we do need to start moving ahead, that we can still do that and send things over to Consolidation Committee. And even when we spoke about that in budget, I think there was still that realization of, at that point, it was merely a week and a half ago, that the committee meeting was on the 28th, and the reality was we still were going to have to move forward.
Well, I think there's only one job that needs to be filled tonight. Is that correct? And that's the one
That's correct.
that you're asking for. And then beyond that, I guess my feeling was that that once July 1st comes, that these people are going to be working it out on the ground. We've got a plan on paper, and then we've got the reality of Mr. Draper and his people that he's going to be working with. And I don't think there's going to be, I think it would be a good process to have him doing this at the same time that someone from the town is looking at the situation, as possible consolidation. So I don't have any problem with what you said. We can, as long as someone gets a look at it with the idea of, can we consolidate? We've been talking about this forever, and here's our opportunity. So regardless of the timing, et cetera, I think it's important that we give Dr. Thornton this job that he's looking for to go back to the ESP in the negotiations, because we need that very much tonight. And then what we do with the rest of the package is up to you.
All right, are there any further comments on the motion? All right. Lorraine, could you read it back to us one more time?
Motion was made by Larry Cerisi, seconded by Linda Avanzato, to approve the plan as presented and recommended by the superintendent, with the caveat we'll be just approving the plan and we'll come back to the budgetary aspect.
All right.
Roll call.
Roll call vote, please.
Kimberly Page.
Yes.
Joe Thompson.
No.
Linda Avanzato.
Yes.
Larry Cerisi.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-1.
Okay, my only question, Dr. Thornton, would be, with this passing, to advertise for the senior accounts clerk or whatever, I don't remember what we agreed the name would be, do you need to have an amount listed or a payroll? We don't really advertise something and not list.
In terms of, it's the current contractual rate for a senior clerk, it's the current contractual number.
Okay, so we haven't precluded that would be something that we've bound your hands that's not in there, am I correct?
I believe I'm okay. And
Okay.
from this conversation, I will be posting tomorrow for that one position.
Mrs. Avanzato.
So it sounds like we still have some flexibility. I would ask that the plan get sent to the Consolidation Subcommittee as well as the Budget Subcommittee for some commentary and feedback on it.
Is that a motion?
I would make a motion.
I'll second.
Do we need to?
I don't know if we need to. I think if we just all agreed that was where we wanted to go, that's what we can do. I mean, it still is, we've talked about in Budget Sub, and we have already said in Budget Sub that we wanted to send it over to the Consolidation Committee.
Correct.
So
Yep.
I think that'll be fine. All right. That brings us to new business.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Susi.
If I'm understanding correctly, those two new business items are not for action this evening, for discussion only, and I believe Mr. Welch requested those two agenda items, so out of courtesy to him, I'll ask that we table those two agenda items tonight and add them for our next agenda.
I think that's appropriate. All right, the last one, C, was on artificial turf at the stadium. I brought this up, so I'll speak to this. As you probably know, the town council has decided to put on as a bond putting down turf at the McGinn Field up in Davis, by Davisville Middle School. And that will be going out to bond here in the fall. I know that there have been several people who have expressed to me that they would like to see turf here at the high school. And I know that we have had presentations on this in years before. I don't think that it would be appropriate for us to ask the town council to switch the bond from the high school to, from McGinn Field, because I think they've already made that motion, they've made that decision. My question that I wanted to ask this committee was whether we wanted to ask the town council if they would open the bond up to be not only for McGinn Field, but also for the high school field. I had a conversation with a former town council member as to if we were way off in our timing in terms of that this is June, the end of June, the state legislature, which also has to make sure that it approves this, has to have some time to do that. And Mr. Cooney indicated to me that he didn't know if there would be special sessions that we might be able to put that up. He still thought there could be time that if the town, and this is all based on a lot of ifs, that if we wanted to make that suggestion, if the town council took that suggestion, that yes, there might be time for the state legislature to then put it in front of the voters. Like I said, there are many ifs. The first if I guess I would ask this committee is, do we want to even ask the town council that question? Mrs. Avanzato.
Well, I think in terms of what the bond that's already been put out by the town council, if it's an either-or situation, it's a slam dunk. It really needs to be at North Kingstown High School. I mean, you can't protect the field over at McGinn. You know, anyone can just drive right onto it, and, you know, our students don't benefit from it. We have control of the stadium here. So if it was an either-or situation, and I've heard a lot of people bring up the idea of having artificial turf, but my own personal feeling on it is, in this economy, I just don't think we can do that. I don't think their bond has that much of a chance of passing. I mean, I'm not trying to curse their bond, but, I mean, my own opinion is our school buildings are more important than turf anywhere. I mean, we need money to fix our buildings. And I'm worried about these turf bonds detracting from what we're trying to do with the school buildings, personally. So I can't support that because of the economy. But as I said, in an either-or situation, to me, the stadium just makes far more sense. We could make money. We could also make it, you know, if we had a committee that would report back to us on perhaps making some revenue, which I've heard some ideas out, if we had turf at the stadium, that would be one thing. But just to go out there with our bond ratings, the bond ratings dropping in the whole state, North Kingstown bond ratings dropping, I just don't see bonding for turf when we have school buildings that need to be fixed. That's just where I'm coming from.
Let me clarify. I wouldn't be asking the town council for it either or. I would be asking them to add on this, because like I said, I feel like they've already made their decision, so I would not want to put them in that position. This would be more or less, you know, I too know that the economy is rough, but I guess if the question is going to be asked of people in town, I'd like to say, let's ask for all the needs in the town, because I do see that, and you're perfectly right, there may not be anything that passes, but right now, we don't have anything that we're prepared to go to for other school issues. So I'm just saying, since the bond is going out, why don't we ask if we can add on to it? I think you have a very valid point that we should be asking for educational buildings, but that, for many reasons, beyond our control, is not going to happen. But this could be something. So that's why I'm asking the committee, in the best of worlds, would you support this? Mr. Thompson.
This is one of the issues that I'm going to actually write a letter to the paper. I haven't written to the paper since I was elected to the school committee. And I'm going to oppose both bonds. And I'm going to remind the people of the town that next year, at this very time, we've just come through a most painful budget process. And one of the things that held us back and held us down, not just the school, but the library and the town, was this thing called bond debt. And the bond debt is an amazing burden to ask of the people in this town. So when you just think of going out and floating another bond, that's like a credit card purchase. And you have to come back and you have to pay it year after year after year. And all the money that you pay for bond debt takes away from the schools and the town and the library. So that's why I'm not going to support either of those two bonds.
All right. I think I've heard pretty clearly from the committee, so I'm not going to say anything more on that. Let's go ahead and move on to special reports. Dr. Thornton, do you have anything to say under here?
I do not. The reports speak for themselves. I'll take any questions on enrollment if the committee has any.
All right, that also, then the next thing that brings us to our standing committee, subcommittee reports. And under there, why don't we talk a little bit about the letter that we received from the calendar committee, since that was one of the things that was, we've received the letter last time and it's not in front of us for approval or anything. So let's have a discussion of where we see that we want to go in our conversation with the state as to, I'm trying to make this as open-ended as possible. Mrs. Avanzato and I had a conversation the other day where we were just talking about calendars and that sort of thing. And we had in front of us 2 weeks ago a letter that was proposed from the calendar committee to send out to superintendents of the state and other school committees to give a direction for a statewide calendar. That was not passed by our committee, and just in an effort to move forward, I'd say, what sort of conversation do we want to have with other school committees, superintendents, about any sort of an overall statewide calendar? What sort of things would you want to include? So maybe I should make it open-ended like that versus things that you don't like about the letter. Mrs. Avanzato.
Well, as I said during our conversation, a couple of the points made by Dr. Auger in terms of getting ready for kneecaps and having so many days off in the beginning of the year, and also Mr. Avedijan's made that point as well. And I think there was quite a bit of agreement in the surveys on that. But when you take all of those proposals together, including like the vacation, I think combining the 2 vacations in the winter to 1, if I recall, the majority of the people were against that pretty overwhelmingly, majority of parents and citizens that answered those surveys. And a couple of different reasons were given. Nurses were saying that in terms of germs, they just preferred having, and it's a long winter. A lot of parents like the 2 vacations. So I just thought that a modified version of the letter is what, but, I mean, we can take a vote. If others disagree, that's okay, too.
I think one of the things I saw is my version, or not my version, but my view of the letter is to get the conversation started among the people in the state of where do we want to go. And so I saw the letter as saying, what sort of things do and maybe we need to turn the letter down that this is what we propose to more of other school committees, what sort of conversations are you having? What sort of things would you want to take off? I know one of the things Mrs. Avanzato and I talked about were religious holidays, that I have my own personal religious views, and they may differ from many other people. And so days that I want my children to take off may be totally different from days that other people take off. And so in thinking of that, and especially as we become a more pluralistic society, it would be my view that we did not take off any religious holidays so that each family could decide what were special in their family. And that then when they took off for those, that they would be able to send a note in and say, this is an excused absence because this is our religious preference. And that I saw as being more accommodating. The other benefit of that would then be that we would have to, or the other thing that would be an outcome of that, I should say, is that we would have to make sure the teachers, if a student did take off, that they were not required to make up, or I should say, they were not given testing on that day, or that you wouldn't have the homework assignment that was due and that you would then be penalized because you were absent for a religious reason. My students previously came from Washington State, and in that state they did not take off for any religious holidays. And it did not seem to be a problem when students took off for their own, whatever background they were. So, I guess, like I said, that perhaps our letter should not be as directive as to be opening up the conversation. Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Avanzato.
I'm okay with the letter except for that one line, and I mentioned it last week. It was something where you said some of these holidays are not being observed as much as they were in the past, or something of that nature, and I just felt that that might hurt some people's feelings, and if you took that one off, I'd vote on the letter as it is. And I think even given the things that Kim just said, it certainly would open up the conversation, even just sending that letter as is. I have not seen the survey that Mrs. Avanzato is talking about. My sense is that there is a lot of people who would like to have one holiday and then get off earlier in the summer. So, like I say, I haven't seen the survey, so I don't know that.
Yeah, that wasn't what the number said. But
Yeah.
Zavanzato.
Yeah, just to your point, Kim, you were saying having the letter open a conversation. I think that would be appropriate, but I saw the letter as being very, as you said, directed, basically said the school committees have the opinion that we need to eliminate this, eliminate that, eliminate this, eliminate that, and everybody get out, change the vacation. And some of those things were supported by the community and others were not. And I just didn't want to just wholesale throw it out. I would be fine with something, a little bit less directed and maybe getting some ideas from other communities where they want to go also.
So where do we want to move on from here? I know, Mr. Avedisian, you're up there to speak, and unfortunately, this is a business session, so we don't take citizens' comments at this time. So, no, I don't think so. So I apologize that that's not how it is. But what I would say is Dr. Auger has the letter. We can get this all in a PDF form, and or not PDF, I'm sorry, in
Word.
a Word. Yes, thank you. In a Word format, and perhaps we can try to do a little wordsmithing so that we can find something that is acceptable to the community. Would we want to task Dr. Auger with taking the comments that we have made thus far to start the wordsmithing?
I think I have some ideas from the group.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to wordsmith.
Thank you. I think that would be far more productive than us trying to wordsmith at this point.
And I'll make sure Mr. Avedisian is in on that, too.
And what I would say is after this committee meeting, if any members can stick around and Mr. Avedisian can address some of the issues that I know that he would love to speak to us more about.
We have to make sure the school committee agrees with the letter since it's our name on it. I just want to make that point,
It'll have to come back to us.
I've heard the concerns.
Okay.
I'm thinking in terms of, I think was what you said, Mrs. Avanzato, about, opening up the conversation, and that our goals are to shorten the school year.
Goals.
To have fewer days out early in the year when we're preparing for testing and trying to get our kids rocking and rolling, and perhaps get out a little earlier at the end of the year so we don't have to deal with the windows that won't open on the third floor.
Or fix them.
Problems in one.
All right. I think that brings us to the end of our agenda. I just want to say something before we end here. I'll say right now, thank you, folks, for voting me as your chair in a unanimous vote. I am kind of a little humbled, but at the same time, I also want to say that next time I will do better at keeping us focused, of making sure we stay on task. And so I do apologize for my not keeping us on task in part of this meeting. I would do a better job of that. I will say, let's all remember that we are very passionate about coming here to work with the children. And so let's make sure that the comments that we bring to this table and to the audience are such that we're addressing the issues and not the people. And I think if we all remember that, this meeting will go much better. So thank you very much. I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
One more question or thought. Congratulations to you. And it was an excellent meeting. It's 9:23. That's a first. And I've wanted to speak to a couple of points because people have said to me that somehow I'm...
Joe, why don't we...
Well, this is the whole point, is that when we start to try to speak about something, and I'm not even going to say the topic, when we get shut down, then we have to keep coming back to it. So I want to say something in the words of one of my favorite philosophers. And Julia, if you'll take this back, we want you, we need you, and we love you. If I get a chance to tell anything more than that about the contract at some point in the future, I will come back to it, and I hope I will never have to speak to it again. Thank you very much.
We have, the end of the meeting, we have a motion to adjourn, and I have a second.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Joe, all you have to do is talk about it under budget. Budget, it's a budget item.
I've got a whole bunch of stuff.
Say it under budget. You can't say it under correspondence, that's all.